How do we respond when we have those who oppose the faith? How are we meant to respond? Here we have James and John perhaps getting a little too enthusiastic. There was obviously Samaritans who didn't like Jesus. They didn't like what Jesus was doing, where Jesus was going. They perhaps didn't like the religion that was developing. And James and John here, they want to call down the thunder of God to destroy these people, to burn them up. That's not the way of the saint. But there is that temptation, I think, within all of us. When our freedoms are taken away, when we are persecuted, when we are hurt, when we are ridiculed, is to respond in kind, to respond with violence, to respond with treachery, to respond with something that's not of God. Today we celebrate two sets of saints. Saint Wenceslaus, the king of Bohemia, which is currently the Czech Republic, who lived in Prague, who lived at a time where Christianity was just emerging. And he advocated for the freedoms of Christians. He became a Christian himself and promoted the Christian faith and promoted freedoms for Christians. Many of us have experienced a lack of freedom over the last many months, last 18 months now or so. And perhaps we can respond in the way of James and John from the gospel. Let's call down the fire of God. Let's destroy these politicians. Let's destroy the city because we want to have control. Maybe that's the reaction we want to have. And maybe that's the gut feeling some of us have too. And it's tempting to have that position. James and John had this position. And I'm sure there are many Catholics, even maybe some of the ones who are listening, who might have this position as well. So Wenceslaus, he took the model of let's encourage faith, do what we can to promote freedoms for people who are of faith, but let's witness it through our own lives. He was known through his dedicated personal prayer, but also through living that out daily in charity. And there's a famous Christmas song about good King Wenceslaus. It's always a very hard word to sing when you start to sing Wenceslaus. But he was known for his charity. And we should be known for that as well, not for raining down thunder. So Laurence Ruiz, the first martyr from the Philippines, this is an interesting story as well. He was a husband and he'd been accused of a murder. And they hadn't quite worked out what the situation was. And so he was advised by some Dominican priests to come with them to Japan to basically isolate for a period of time so that the legal system and those who were doing the investigations would have enough time to be able to find the real person who actually committed the murder. A really interesting sort of story. So he escaped out of the Philippines, went up to Japan with a series of Dominican priests who sort of took him into isolation, you could say. And while in Japan, something incredible happened. The Japanese there didn't accept these foreigners who arrived. They didn't accept Christians, and they started to persecute the Christians. And Laurence and all of these Dominican priests who he was with were brutally tortured after torture, told, abandon your faith and worship something else. And Laurence stayed true to his faith. He stayed true to Jesus Christ in the midst of great difficulties. He never got back to the Philippines. But his body was eventually brought back, and he's the first martyr of the Philippines. So we think of him today. We think of missionaries who are opposed at different times. Are we going to take the stance from the Gospel of James and John? When there's opposition, let's respond harder, with harder opposition and with something that's not of God. Or do we respond with courage, with prayerfulness, with charity? That's the way of Wenceslaus. That was the way of Laurence Ruiz and the Dominican companions. Let us honour them today, pray for missionaries, pray for martyrs, And pray that we'll have the courage to live out the way of Christ today with prayer, with charity, with joy and with peace. So Wenceslaus and St. Laurence, Ruiz and companions, pray for us.